we're back again for another edition of What's Going On allpointstv.com, and also at WFOV, that's 92.1 on the radio dial, and we're glad to have them as our partners here at the studio, allpointstv.com. And we are glad to have you with us today at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, and we are going to be talking about a couple of topics here. Mainly, I want to talk about something that we were talking about on the radio show this past week. And I wanted to bring some documentation to the program that I didn't have at my disposal when we were discussing global warming and the so-called cause of how that connects with pollution, and pollution is causing carbon dioxide pollution is causing global warming. I didn't have the documentation at that time, but I knew the premise was wrong based upon having read some of the documentation that we have misapplied and misunderstood. But I have the documentation today at the studio here at allpointstv.com, and I want to read it so that we can understand how the scientific community has been misrepresented in terms of the claims they're making about global warming. And global warming, by the way, was a position that we had in the aftermath of having said before that there was a global cooling. They were saying that they were misinterpreting the data and saying that we're entering into another ice age. And when that was not sustainable because the globe was not freezing, it was not cooling as they said it was doing, then the premise became one in 1979. The premise was then there was the globe was in fact warming. And then that was a premise that could not be sustained because that wasn't happening either. And we didn't have pollution causing global warming. So that had to be abandoned. So it gone from global cooling to global warming, and both those premises were proven false. Man wasn't causing either one. So now it is the position is we have climate change. And of course, climate change happens because you have the four seasons. So man's not causing that, obviously, because you have that as a cyclical part of the way that the universe operates. So I brought the data to the studio so that we can be very clear about how we are misrepresenting the data for a lot of reasons, political reasons. We're misappropriating the data, and we're making claims that are unscientific. I was told in the studio last week at this program that the issue of global warming, man-made global warming and man-made climate change is pretty much put to bed. 97% of the scientists agree on it. And so the climatologists have pretty much agreed to consensus that man-made global warming or man-made climate change is occurring, and it's because of the things that we're doing. And the pollutant that's causing it is carbon dioxide. And since I had read the literature a long time ago and went back over just a couple of days ago, as a matter of fact, I thought I would come to the studio and try to clear up what the data points out, because the data is not supportive of the idea that 97% of the scientists agree that climate change or global warming is man-made. Let me read from the document, one of the documents, quantifying the consensus on anthropogenic. The word anthropogenic means man-made. So quantifying the consensus on man-made global warming in the scientific literature. And this is an article written by John Cook and others. John Cook is a major writer of this article. But let me read what John Cook writes in the article. The abstract from the article says, we, meaning John Cook, Dana Nucitelli, Sarah Green, Mark Richardson, Bobo Winkler, Rob Painting, Robert Ray, Peter Jacobs, and Andrew Skuse, S-Q-U-C-E. This, when they say we analyzed the evolution of the scientific consensus on anthropogenic anthropogenic global warming in the peer-reviewed scientific literature examining 11,944 climate abstracts from 1991 to 2011, matching the topics global climate change, global warming, and so on. So these 11,000 scientists have put abstracts in about their position on global warming. Of that 11,944 scientists, this is this group having gone over what they wrote. They say we find that 66.4% of the abstracts express no position on anthropogenic global warming. So 66% of the scientists that wrote papers could not find and did not endorse the premise that global warming was anthropogenic in its cause, meaning that 66% of the 11,944 scientists could not verify and could not put their name on saying that global warming, quote unquote, was man-made. The 32% then, since 2/3 had said they could not endorse the premise as man-made, 32% did endorse the premise. Of that 32%, 97.1% endorsed the consensus position that humans are causing global warming. So everybody runs out and says 97% of the people that are in the climatologists who submitted their papers, 97% agree that global warming is man-made. In the abstract put out by John Cook and others, is 97% of the 33%, not 97% of the whole scientific group that put their papers in. It's not 97% of all of the climatologists. It's 97% of the 33%. That's a whole different ball game when you say 97% of 33%. 66% of the climatologists are outside the pool who made no determination one way or the other because they need further study. And you're not going to be able to get it in their lifetime, by the way, because it has to be studied over a long period of time. And that's why they weren't able to draw any conclusions from it, because they don't have enough time yet to decide upon whether or not it's man-made or not. So they simply absent themselves from drawing the conclusion. So the 97% that's being quoted is 97% of the 33%. And to put it at the to say carbon dioxide is causing it, when 97 when they're saying that it's man-made, they're talking about carbon dioxide, which is a ridiculous premise that carbon dioxide is causing global warming, because first of all, carbon dioxide is not a pollutant. Carbon dioxide is plant food. And so when you make carbon dioxide a pollutant, it's because they promote the idea of the carbon, and they leave out the oxygen aspect to it, and they say carbon. So then people think carbon, they think about coal and things like that, because that's carbon, but it's not carbon, it's carbon dioxide. Just take your hand out when it's cold and blow in your hand, and you'll see where there's a little. You can see like the coal. It's been moisturized, and you see the moisture of the carbon dioxide when it's cold. And when you blow it out, you see the carbon dioxide. But after it gets into the atmosphere, you don't see it anymore, because the atmosphere is using the carbon dioxide, and the trees are taking it in as plant food, and the plants are the trees, for example, letting out oxygen. And so the carbon dioxide taken in, it lets out oxygen. Humans take the oxygen in, and they let out carbon dioxide. The two are working in harmony with each other. You need more carbon dioxide, quite frankly, on the planet, not less. And to say that it's a pollutant, there's no scientist would say in the scientific world. They may say it out in public, but no scientist would say that carbon dioxide is pollutants. What they say in the public, they'll say that it is causing man-made global warming is a problem, and they say it to the public because that's how you get grants. They don't give you grants for non-problems. They give you grants for having come up with a problem. So the scientists out here telling the people that carbon dioxide, in other words, we as human beings are a problem on the planet, and that by our very existence, we are in fact destroying the presence by living. The idea is anti-life. It's an anti-life premise. Man is not polluting the earth by breathing. Carbon dioxide does not pollute the earth. There is no carbon dioxide is not a pollutant, and that's what I was trying to say in this program. It's a false premise, and 97% of the people that were at did this particular study did not conclude that carbon dioxide is a pollutant. 2/3 of the scientists had no position on that premise. It's 97% of the ones that bought into the premise of the carbon dioxide being a pollutant. But it was not 97% of all of the scientists. So that's a misappropriation of the scientific position. Now, the father that they're quoting of the idea of carbon dioxide, I have his name now. I couldn't think of it earlier. Roger Lavelle. The father of the idea of pollution, carbon dioxide causing global warming. The father of that premise is a person that worked at Harvard University, Roger Revelle, who studied, first of all, the science of, the first study he had was what's the effect of the nuclear bombs that were dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. He wanted to study what's the cause of, how does that affect the pollution of the atmosphere in terms of nuclear weapons. And once that study was over, he went into wanted to set up a school to study pollution in other areas. And so he wanted to study what does carbon dioxide, what's the effect of carbon dioxide upon pollution. And he set a school up to study that, thought he'd be the chancellor of it. And when they didn't make him chancellor, he went then to Harvard University, where he taught climatology there. And his class was to put out the notion we should study the effect of carbon dioxide on the climate. One of his students was Al Gore. Al Gore thought that what Lavelle was saying is that there was a connection between the two. What Lavelle was saying is that he wanted to study the premise and never concluded from that point up until the time that Lavelle died. He died in 1991. He never drew the conclusion that carbon dioxide caused global warming. In fact, Lavelle was asked, did he feel some responsibility for people running off with the premise, quoting him, when he never made the position in the first place that was a connection between the two. He never concluded that. Yet they're quoting Lavelle as the father of the idea of the causality between carbon dioxide and global warming. Lavelle never took that position. And you can go and read on the internet. You can go and draw up John Williams, who's the founder of the Weather Channel. Go look at the video that he made, where he is talking about this false premise that was placed in the court of Lavelle, how they misappropriated Lavelle's study. John Williams, who is the father of the Weather Channel, also he's the first meteorologist on Good Morning America. He started the Weather Channel, the weather studies in these programs they have on TV. He's the person that put out a very good video on this false claim that's being made, and I'm only quoting what the scientific community has written in their own writings. There is no connection. Most scientists do not agree that there is a connection between carbon dioxide and the globe warming. And I was trying to make the point that you have to suspend your own intelligence, because what warms the globe up is the sun. I mean, this is amazing that you can have the sun as a constant. When it recedes, the globe gets cooler. When it's not receding, like in the summertime when it's at its peak, you have warming in the area where the sun is, the sun is in different positions by the Earth rotating on its axis. So the sun is in a different position. The Earth is in a different position to the sun based upon the rotation of the Earth on its axis, so that as the Earth is turning, as it turns away from the sun, they're turning away from the sun. When it turns away from the sun, that part is cooler. When it turns back toward that part gets back toward the sun then it's warmer. That's how you have the seasons. So the people are saying that the globe is cooling and the globe is warming based upon pollution, but the globe is cooling and the globe is warming all the time. You have a built-in warming of the sun is built into the cooling of the sun. The globe warms in the daytime, for example. It cools at night. Nighttime is nature's refrigerator. In other words, at night it's cool. So the air conditioning of the Earth and the warming of the Earth is the inverse of each other, just like carbon dioxide is the inverse of the oxygen. That's the world, that's the Earth operating scientifically in normacy. They made the abnorm, they made the norm abnorm. In other words, the warming of the Earth and the cooling of the Earth is cyclical. Nature has always done that. And the idea of the warming caused by man, you have to then explain why it is that you had an ice age. By the way, we're still in the ice age. We never left the ice age. That's why you have the two polar caps in the North Pole and the South cap. In the South Pole, we're still in an ice age. We never left the ice age. It's just that the ice doesn't cover as much of the Earth as it once did. And when you had the ice age in 10,000 BC, between 8,000 BC and 10,000 BC, the ice began to recede, but you don't have any man plants at that time. You don't have any pollution plants at that time, like making cars and other plants putting pollutants in the air. You didn't have any of that. But how did we get out of the ice covering a large part of the Earth at that point, where the ice age was much worse than it is right now? But we're in the ice age right now. You have the ice age by the fact that polar caps are still there. Sometimes the polar cap at the North Pole will decline. In other words, sometimes the ice cap will, some of the ice will melt in the north, and they'll say that's because of global warming. But then if that's global warming, how do you explain that while the ice cap is in fact receding in the north, in the Arctic, while it's expanding in the Antarctic, because the ice cap in the Antarctic is expanding. And so how can the same phenomena, which is what the scientific community is raising in their papers, how does the same phenomena cause two different polar reactions? At the North Pole, you have the ice cap reclining, and in the South Arctic region, you have the ice cap expanding, and that can be explained very easily. The Antarctic is on land, and the Arctic is on water. So if you talk about when the ice cap is melting, water underneath the ice cap in the northern region, water melts ice. Land does not have that effect. So pollution is not the cause. The cause is that there is a cycle to how nature operates. It's not the carbon dioxide causing that. If you make more carbon dioxide, the trees have more food to eat. The growing season is longer. And if you need more food, that's a good thing. And the scientific community does not dispute that notion. So quantifying the consensus on anthropogenic global warming in the scientific literature does not support the idea that carbon dioxide causes pollution. 66% of the 1/3 accept that premise, but the 2/3 do not accept that premise, and only 97% of the ones that take the position of man-made global warming take that position. 3% of them deny that. In that 1/3, 3% of them deny that it's man-made, and it's not man-made. The sun is causing it. We have not looked at the sun. Part of the sun has burned out, and that cataclysmic volcanic kind of reaction to the sun is causing different things to happen in the climate. The sun is causing it. All of that is caused by the sun. The scientists don't disagree with that in their papers. So this idea that carbon dioxide is causing global warming, I can tell you right now, reading their papers, and I brought Cook here, John Cook, because John Cook is a major one putting out this premise. John Cook's own paper does not support that premise. 97% of the 1/3, not 97% of the 11,944 scientists is not 97% of all the scientists. 97% of the 1/3 that agree with the premise. And that's in their own paper. So I just want you to be aware that there is the documents you can go to, and some of you go to look at this issue. I should have brought it to the studio to refer you to some of the videos that are out there on YouTube, because all the scientists out there on YouTube that are vacating this premise, because they've been misquoted and they want to correct the record, and they're on YouTube denying that John Cook quoted their research properly. Many of them are saying that they are misquoted in the documentation. They misquoted these scientists who did not agree that there's a causality between carbon dioxide and global warming. They don't agree with that. The scientific community has not agreed on that. There is no consensus on that. Nor will there ever be consensus, because the sun is up there causing the globe to warm. The sun causes also to cool, because the sun causes the rotation of the Earth on its axis. The sun causes that also. By the sun rays hitting at the equator, that's what turns the Earth around. That's why the Earth turns on its axis. The sun causes that as well. The sun causes the Earth to rotate. And so this idea that there's consensus on man causing through man-made carbon dioxide is causing the Earth to be polluted is pure scientific. The scientific community, balks at that premise. They have not proven that, nor will they ever prove that, because carbon dioxide is not even a pollutant. Okay, that's the first part of what I wanted to say. Global warming is not caused by carbon dioxide, because carbon dioxide is not a pollutant. Carbon dioxide is plant food. Okay, we take a break from that. I need to get off this because I get heated thinking about these people that are trying to, they're walking out of studios because you have a different point of view. But I have a point of view that I can document, and they have one they can't document. Okay, we're going to take a break from WFOV. I think it's time for that break. I'm going to continue what I'm saying here, though, about the some other issues that we raised there. Global warming was just one of them. So we also talked about the water crisis in different parts of the country, and they were saying, what is the solution to the water crisis? And they were saying, you're way off the mark in talking about the Constitution. How do you bring the Constitution into that discussion? I brought it into that discussion from the standpoint that we have in the Constitution the idea of the framers of limited government. And they asked a question about how did it come into pollution while drinking out of water bottles that's put out by the private sector. Now, what's the connection between the two? The connection is here they're drinking out of water bottles because the water that's put out by the government has lead in it, but they're drinking out of the water bottles. Is there lead in that water? And then asking, what's the solution to the water problem? And you're drinking out of a water bottle, asking the question of what the solution is. You're moving from the water put out by the government, and you're going into the water put out by the private sector, and you're asking what is the solution to the water crisis? The solution to the water crisis is what the framers had in the Constitution. Limited government. Government shouldn't be producing the water for the people. The private sector should be producing it. The profit motive will clean the water up, because then you have the persons that's producing the water must in fact produce clean water, because the profit motive would demand that they do so. The government when the government gets involved in that, you get what you got right now. They're drinking out these water bottles asking, what's the solution? They got the solution in their hand. You're drinking the water put out by the private sector. That water doesn't have lead in it. And why is the lead not in that water? Because if it had lead in it, you wouldn't buy it. The government doesn't give it a choice in the matter. And they got bottled water. Do you see anybody going from bottled water trying to get away from that to drink the government water? The framers had itemized through the Constitution the itemization of government, and the idea of government was limited government, and limited government means then that the implied idea of the government is capitalism. It's the implication of the founders. Capitalism is implied in the founding documents of the country. Government would do these things and would not do the things that it's not supposed to be done because it's not enumerated in the Constitution. They're doing all these other things, and they're doing them as government will do them, very badly. Okay, I see they're coming back to my rant. But I'm saying here that the answer is in your hands. You're drinking the water that's produced by the private sector, because that is the answer. And you tell them what the answer is, they want to get mad because they don't consider it to be the solution. The solution is turn it over to the private sector. I guarantee you that the impurities that are in water right now are there because there is no private property incentive in the water drinking. All the water in all the governments are polluted. in Detroit too.
I'd like to ask people this too, though. Okay, you've seen the water crisis in Flint, and I ask these people who are the water warriors and the water protectors. Okay, you see this government follow up from every level of government. Screw this up, every level. They're getting tired. I'm getting tired of hearing this. Snyder. Snyder had a big role in it. He should be held accountable. I'm not denying that, but so should the former city council members and some of the city council members who are still seated. But yeah, I say now you want to hand it over to your health care over to people much like these same people who got you where you're at now with the water, and and nobody said how that's any different. They just drop the subject, just walk away. How? Okay, again, ask if you always want to give. I'll put this out. If you seen what happened to Flint, an outrage, why would you trust governmental type of people for the oversight of your health care? Okay, answer me that. Okay, answer me why you would, after seeing this, why would you trust these type of people again? That's what I'd like to know.
It is amazing how we see government being inefficient in everything that it does, and we want to turn over more things for the government to do when there is absolute inefficiency in every realm of government. There is nothing that government does that it does well. You cannot name one thing the government does well. There are some things the government does that no other, sector can do. For example, the things it was important to do, the referee for the to be an arbiter of disputes among the American people. That's the proper role of government. The enforcement of the laws, government doesn't do a good job of it, but government was set up to enforce the law. We were set up to keep the bully off of the individual's back. It was also set up in order to maintain the national integrity. How are they doing with that, by the way? The government is supposed to maintain the national defense. That means the national sovereignty of the country. They're not even doing a good job with that. The three things we set government up is to keep the bully from violating the rights of the individual. So the bully is bigger than us as individuals, so we set the government up as a collective who embodies the will of the people to keep the bully off our back. That's one reason we set government up. We set government up as a referee when there's a dispute between one citizen and another, and also to provide for the national defense. Those are the three things we set government up. Beyond that, government goes beyond the reason why government was in fact set up as an institution. It's doing all these other things and doing all these other things badly. And it's amazing to me that I'm in a studio where people are drinking the water out of a water bottle and they're asking, what's the solution to the problem? The solution is in your hands. Government not the solution to that problem. Government created that problem. There's no profit motive in it. The solution to the pollution problem in our water and so on and so forth, the lead in our water, is to put a profit on it. For example, let me give another example of the same thing. Have you noticed? Now, they were trying to say that because we have global warming, they were saying that the polar bear is endangered because they went up there in the Arctic region and they saw some bears on ice that was very, very small pieces of ice out there in the Arctic Ocean. And they said that shows you that the polar bears are dying because look at there's a bear here and they don't see any more bears and they got this bear out there on this small piece of ice. And they wanted to make the claim that this shows the polar bears are dying out. I guess everybody had come through the Goldilocks and the three bears. And they saw one bear out there by himself. And people were told that that's because of global warming. And the ice is melting and so on and so forth. You know something, they don't respect us. Our politicians and our side, these people out here making money on this global warming nonsense, they don't respect us. A bear out there on a small piece of ice is out there taking a vacation. Because polar bears are not like lions, for example. Have you ever seen a polar bear hunting with other polar bears, you're not going to see it, because the polar bear can take down its food without any other polar bears helping it out. That's why they are not gregarious animals. They and their cubs and so on, they're by themselves. If the lions were like that, the lions couldn't survive, because one got to jump on the buffalo back and kind of hold on to his spine. One got to grab his nose. One got to go on his throat. One got to go after his feet and that cut off his mobility. And they have to bring the animal down by working in a pack. Polar bears are not gregarious animals. So they see one polar bear and claim the polar bear population is declining. The polar bear population is not declining. Ask yourself the question, why is it that all of you out there right now in the listenership of this studio and also WFOV, everybody in the city of Flint, in Genesee County, United States, eat chicken. Why do we run out of chicken? Why? Why is it that nobody's ever said, with all of us eating chicken, that chicken is an endangered species? Why is it endangered? You know why it's not endangered? Because the private profit motive makes sure chicken never goes out of existence. Why? Because chicken has a value to it. The private sector, you'll never get rid of chicken. And everybody in the city of Flint is selling chicken. Kentucky Fried Chicken, I'm not advertising for them. Popeye's Chicken, look at how many people sell chicken. And then everybody cook chicken on Friday. Maybe fish on Friday, chicken on Sunday. We had chicken every Sunday. My mother would skip and save, and every Sunday we had chicken. I don't care what else we had. Chicken, we had chicken on Sunday was chicken day. And we have not run out of chicken yet. You know why? Because chicken is not in the government sector, it's in the private sector. If you had chicken run by the government, chicken would be extinct by now. But because the profit motive is attached to it, the more chicken you eat, guess what? The more chicken available. They just grow more chickens. In other words, they don't put more of the eggs in the grocery store. They hatch more chickens. They put more roosters in the chicken yard, and because the profit motive is the answer. But when you say the profit motive is the answer, they want to get mad because they want some miraculous answer coming from the government. The government will never have the answers, because the government, what the government wants is to expand its power. And if the answer is not in government but in the private sector, they're never going to explain the answer to the problem. The answer to the water crisis is not in the government. The answer to the water problem is to let the private sector manage the water, not the government, which is ill-equipped, ill-advised, ill-informed, and unable to deliver efficiency to create a water supply that is in fact clean. And they have no incentive to do it, because they're not punished because of that, because they have a monopoly on the water that comes through your pipes. Have you noticed somebody else put water through your pipes? If the government wasn't doing it, if the government allowed others to do it, in order for the government to stay in the water business, it'd have to clean its act up. But because it has a monopoly on it, the government doesn't even have to be efficient in terms of the mail, because it won't let anybody else put in the mail in the mailbox. That's why you call it snail mail. The government doesn't have any competition. If you had some others out there that put mail in your mailbox, and this mail, somebody mailed me something from not very outside of Detroit, and I haven't gotten it yet. And I sent a money order to New York, and the guy thought I was trying not to pay him because I had sent it 2 weeks ago. 2 weeks ago, it hadn't arrived yet. I had to give the guy the number to the money order, because the guy thought I was not trying to pay him. I most haven't gotten my money yet, and I can't ship you anything else, books and so on, until I get the payment. I gave him the money order and said it's been mailed. It finally got there, And when it got there, he said this thing went all over the world before it got to my address. Wrinkled up, dated much earlier than when he received it. I think it might have been, I think I might have mailed that one off 3 weeks before he received it.
See, my dad worked at the post office, and he told me, he said a lot of times they objected to how they routed the mail. Say if you sent something here to Flint, you want to drop it off, you want to send a card to your friend across town for a Christmas card or a birthday card, it had to go up to Saginaw, get canceled down there, and then sent back here, and then put in the slot to get delivered to the, because they break up their routes, and all that. Everybody there who was in the know said, this is stupid. Why can't we just cancel it here and put it in the slot? And he said it would take a day and a half or so of, juggling it back, and it just adds cost, and more people have to handle it. And he said they even objected to that. He said we saw such inefficient ways of handling it, and we voiced it, and they just shut us down. So he said we did try to address the issue. He said and they just didn't listen to us.
Gentlemen, we make everything hard. The framers had the right idea. Limited government was their idea. Let the private sector handle the rest of it. Government handles the things the government is structured to do, and it's very limited what they're structured to do. The other things then are not done by the government. It's done in the private sector because people are going to operate everything based upon their own selfish interests. They're not going to operate upon the public interest. People don't operate upon the public interest. I hear people talking about public servants. I guarantee you, anyone that has an idea that, like politicians, they are public servants. Anybody that talks about anyone being a public servant, you are talking about people that have no incentive to deliver anything in your interest. Because people don't operate in the public interest. They operate in their own interest. What do you expect politicians to do?
How come they
come out here and operate and slit their own throats and do things that's unpopular they get them out here, get their where nobody's going to vote for them. They're going to take unpopular positions so that they cannot be reelected. They want to be elected over and over again in those offices, and that's why when you talk about doing that which is for the good of the country, they're going to do that which is good for them being voted in and out of office. They're never going to be public servants. They are people that's going to. There are people that are going to do that which brings in the most votes. And many times, what brings in the most votes will not be the things that's best for the country.
Well, like I know this public service service group and all this. How come our servants make more money than 3/4 of us ever will? Okay, how come our servants are making more money than the masters, if that's if that's your reference point? It just doesn't make any sense to me to say there's supposed to be some kind of noble thing. Let's face it, 3/4 of them are not going to ever, their ineptitude, their mishandling stuff is never going to be fully addressed or addressed at all. So, I mean, where's the recourse for the rest of us who are supposed to be allegedly their bosses? Where's that at?
Yeah, where's it at, John? And your point is well made here. The ones that are public servants are the ones that are producing a product that the public wants and needs, and they cannot make you buy the product. You buy it because you have a need for it, and the person that produced it, because he can't force you to do business with him or her, they have to serve the public in order to get what they want, which is the public to pay them for the product they produce. Therefore, they are public servants that are doing that which will be in their interest, but is also producing something in the interest of the public as well, because the public will be able to do something else with its time by it being able to buy bread, for example. They don't have to make bread. They can then do something else then with the time to make the money to buy the bread. But that's a public servant, but he's not a public servant doing that because he's trying to do the public good. He's trying to serve his own interests. But he can't serve his own interests without serving the interests of the public, because you won't give him your money unless he has something that he has that you want. Now, how many of you think that you are voluntarily giving government your money? How many of you think that when they tell you that you owe this much in taxation, that's a voluntary transaction? That they're only going to take from you that which you're willing to give, and that they are working in your interest in terms of the taxation, so on and so forth. I'll tell you what really gets me down about these politicians, and that's even the one that, with this tax cut we just got. I mean, I just really marvel at the politicians saying that they now have reduced taxes with the tax break, and you are now allowed to keep more of your money. Your, by the way, is used as an adjective in that sentence. So you're now able to keep more of your money, and I'm supposed to clap. I mean, look how brainwashed they have the American people. That they are letting us keep more of our money, and we're supposed to be happy with that. And so they're not taking as much of our money. And they claim that there's a tax break to hide the fact that the taxes are placed upon our children. They don't give you any money back. They take it. And they take it from either the people who are alive now, or they take it from the unborn. They never give any money back. They're looked at as being benevolent influences. They're giving us some of our money back. Why did you take it in the first place? Can I ask that question? If you're giving people their money back, why was it necessary for you to take it? They didn't give you your money back. What they did was put the taxation into the future. In fact, I have money in my savings account. Do you know that they are taxing my savings? You say, well, no, they're not taxing your savings. Yes, they are. Inflation. What is inflation? Anybody ask the question, what is inflation? Inflation is government taxing savings. Because by them printing more and more money out here, the dollars are buying less and less. Therefore, those dollars you got in the bank, those dollars are losing value and losing wealth by sitting in the bank. Because inflation attacks those dollars. Inflation is a tax on savings in the country. So if you try to save the money, you're paying a tax. And they're talking about government having giving people a tax break. Government doesn't give any tax breaks. That's pure nonsense.
Well, do you ever see savings bonds? If you save, you buy a savings bond to help the country along, and you let it, mature, come to full mature, the point where it actually be redeemed. I think you get taxed like 33, 35%. You get taxed. I mean, unless you use it for education. So now they're putting narrow areas of where you could use this money, like for education, like your child or your education. Isn't that wonderful? They're only going to give this back to us and not tax us if we're using it for this purpose that they've deemed worthy for us to keep our own money on. I mean, that's just, I don't understand how people are not outraged by that if they understand that.
The government is very clever. The business community is trying to respond to these government, the fiat policies of government. Government doesn't ask for the people to go along with it. It does a lot of it behind, under the cover, where you can't recognize what it's doing, because the people understood what government was doing. They would not have such a safe haven in these power centers, like in Washington, for example, where the people think that there's benevolence in the power centers in Washington D.C. These people are basically criminals in government. These are the people that's involved in legalized crime, organized crime, from the legal standpoint. If people can understand what government is actually doing, they would see there's no benevolence in government. Government is and people think the government is a benevolent institution because the government will talk about free college, free education, free health care. Do you know of anybody that's willing to do health care and go into that as a career, and they offer their services free? There's nothing free in health care. And the government can't offer anything free until they, first of all, take the wealth from the private sector because government doesn't have any money. It has first of all confiscate wealth before it can distribute it. So every dollar that government puts out there, government has to first of all take it from somewhere in the private sector in order to dispense it in their name. So nothing is free, and and the claim is that the health care is free. I mean, I was listening to and I called them on the air. I called them Attila. I call them what Ayn Rand called them in the book called For the New Intellectual. Ayn Rand calls them Attila. They are Attila. The idea they're benevolent. The politicians are Attila, and they're in disguise. They'll say things like this, for example. If you want your health, if you like your health care, you can keep your health care. If you like your doctor, you can keep your doctor. Now that sounds very benevolent, doesn't it? If you like your health care, you can keep your health care. If you like your doctor, you can keep your doctor. Now it doesn't sound like that's Attila, does it? But think about that a little bit more deeply. Who is that talking? Forget about the fact that when Obama said that he's lying because you didn't keep your doctor, you didn't keep your health care, forget about the fact that he was lying. The question is, who is that talking? Because the inverse of that is if the politicians say, if you like your health care, you can keep your health care, then the inverse of that must also be true. That if they say you cannot keep it, then you cannot keep it. They're saying that you can keep your health care because they've licensed you to keep it. If you like your health care, you can keep it. That's Attila talking. Because I don't need anyone telling me I can keep that which is mine, unless Attila is telling me that if he desires for me not to keep it, then that would not be mine, but it'll be his. That's Attila in disguise. And we don't recognize the voice, which we think is a benevolent. Government is not a benevolent institution. Never has been, never will be. Government is a taker. It is not a dispenser of wealth. It is a taker of wealth. And then it distributes the wealth that it did not create. It dispenses it in its own name. But because we don't understand that, we want more government. When the framers had the idea of less government. Government of the people, by the people, for the people. So the people are to be the ones that are custodians of their own destiny, not government. Government has restricted responsibilities that are itemized in the Constitution. Until we understand that, until we understand the government has to be limited in what it does and what it's allowed to do, you'll never be able to fix this problem. And that's why we got a $21 trillion debt on the books right now, with another $200 trillion in liabilities that government cannot meet in the future, because that obligation will never be met, because the government will never have the resources to meet these obligations in the future. And what they do down the line, when they get to that point there, you're going to understand something, that we are insolvent right now because of our government. America is in fact bankrupt right now. And that's why they're doing deficit spending, because it doesn't have the wealth. The government's already spent all the money. It spends more money than it takes in right now. What they're doing is deficit spending. They're spending the wealth that belongs to the children in the future. They're borrowing that wealth from the future and placing it in the present to hide the bankruptcy that we're already in. And we're talking about the government, how to resolve the problems. You resolve the problem by getting back to the framers. There is no other solution to the problem. And that's why they're trying to dismiss the framers. The framers have the answer. No one else will solve the problem unless we get back to what the framers put in place in this country. We got to get the government out of the pockets of the American people. We got to get the government out of the 3/4 of the things it's doing that is not mandated to do by the Constitution. In Article 1, Section 8, all the things government can do constitutionally is in that provision of Article 1, Section 8 of the Constitution. Everything the government's done beyond that point is unconstitutional. And that's why we're in the problems that we're in, because we left the framers who gave us a frame of reference for what government ought to be doing. They gave us a reference. We won't pay attention to it. And when I say that the answer is the framers in the Constitution, that's what the answer is. It's not going to be found anywhere else. Everything else is a non-answer. The government absolutely cannot resolve this problem. And rather than talking about politicians, which is the man of force, that's why I call them Attila, because all politicians are men and women of force. Government is a institutional force. It's not an institution of negotiation. So nothing that's happening in government is going to solve any of the problems. Government expands the problem. Before I get here, I want to deal with one other item here. The intellectuals, the scholars, who I call parrots. And they asked me for examples of that. George, why do you say they're parrots? I said because of this document right here. I'm holding up the Constitution of the United States. Everybody on the college campus, every professor, no matter what school that the professor teach at, say that we have a Bill of Rights in the Constitution. They all say it, all of them parroting that idea that the Constitution has a Bill of Rights in it, and the idea that would be therefore that our rights come from government. When the documents of the land say that our rights are inalienable, our rights come from God, our rights come from the fact of natural rights, the natural law. Because you're birthed with rights, human rights. They want us to believe that rights come from the government, therefore talk about a Bill of Rights in the Constitution. And everybody on every college campus says that. I brought the Constitution to the studio this past week, and I put it down on the table during the break and said, okay, all of you, all the parrots say that's true. There's a document, show it to me. There is no Bill of Rights in the Constitution. And that's only one part of the parroting, but these are parrots. These are not scholars, these are parrots. One person says something, everybody says it. Those are parrots. There is no Bill of Rights in the Constitution. I'm right and they're wrong. I'm big and they're small, and there's nothing they can do about it because the documentation not on their side is on the side of those who read the documents and now understand it and can quote it. It's in here. It's not in what they're talking about. Okay, I'm through ranting for the day. Don't forget, as hard as it may be, to follow your dream. Because if you don't follow your dream, you'll never know what's on the other side of the rainbow.